Ciao from Miami. Now today's topic is going to be a little more clinical. I often get a lot of clients and I get a lot of questions about trauma. It could be sexual trauma, it could be child abuse, domestic violence, various things that might have happened earlier on in someone's life, and it's playing out in their adult relationships dysfunctionally, and they're trying to get a grasp on their dysfunctional behaviors or their just bad habits and their defense mechanisms, and it's clearly affecting their relationships, and they've tried to get a handle on it but haven't been able to. And they kind of know what's wrong, and they do connect the dots to the trauma, so there is some insight there. Some of them are long-standing therapy consumers. But let's talk about the effects of trauma, especially when it comes to women. Now, there's a lot of talk and judgment about damaged women, quote unquote, the damaged woman. And there might be different subjective perspectives on who that is and what that entails. But, okay, one side of it is a woman who is very dangerous in regards to she has a personality disorder, whether you believe in that stuff or not. As a mental health professional, borderline personality disorder was something that I dealt with in my practice. And borderline personality disordered persons, or persons struggling with that is the nice way to say it, they have a very hard time stabilizing their relationships. They really do not have long-standing, healthy relationships that are functional and positive and contribute to the well-being of the whole. They usually require a lot of damage control, placating, and the partner can be almost like in a caretaking position where they're extremely burnt out because they're overcompensating for the limitations of the BPD person, right? And any personality disorder really has a hard time acknowledging that there's a problem, because the issue with borderline personality disorder and all personality disorders is that they've been there. That's just who they are. So it's not really a new and different, like a change in their behavior or their mood or their cognitive processes. So they don't really see it as a problem. You just have to accept them the way that they are and love them nonetheless. But then what happens with the BPD person is they love you and they hate you. It's like the extreme version of hot and cold. So they idolize you one moment and you're the best person, they're in love with you, they're super passionate, and then the next minute they hate you, they threaten to do scary things or do scary things. It's not always violent, but it can just be erratic, and it can be aggressive and antagonistic. So I've seen a lot of couples in that situation where they're at wit's end. They've been at this for a long time, they've got kids, they are threatening divorce, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to stop this mad train that's off the tracks. So that's one type of damaged woman. Now, I'm not really talking about that today. So I don't really like the term damaged woman for the type of woman I'm talking about. The type of woman I'm talking about is someone who experienced this trauma in her youth, whether it was, very, very young, or elementary, middle, high school age, even, young adulthood and college perhaps. And so this trauma would have created some distorted cognitive understandings of how intimacy works, how sex works, how relationships work. And one way I like to describe it, which seems to fit for a lot of people, is it's like developing all of a sudden an allergy to closeness and intimacy. So maybe, and people obviously respond differently to these types of circumstances, whether they were raped, whether they had some experience of child abuse, whether it was a family member, a neighbor, a teacher, a priest, someone they dated, or someone they knew, but maybe it was like a rape situation by someone that was familiar to them in high school or young adulthood. And so I've actually worked with a lot of women who have had intruder assault, And it's hard to compare. You don't really want to compare traumas, but intruder assault, as horrific and usually very violent as it is, so it's hard. There's a few factors that you need to look at to see, or at least predict the prognosis of the symptomology. So violence, the level of violence is usually one of them. So stranger or intruder assault, sexual assault, is usually quite violent. You might get tied up, you might have a knife, a gun, you might get beat up, you might, the actual, I should put like a warning on this. The actual penetration could be highly, violent, aggressive, to the point where there's physical trauma and injury there as well. So the interesting thing is that sometimes, because it was such a clear, non-familiar person committing this crime, it can sometimes have a better prognosis, because one of the most confusing things to a person is someone that you trusted betraying you to the extent that they injure you so badly that they assault you or they abuse you sexually. It confuses your relationship with affection and love with this sordid, disgusting, gross, violent crime of sexual trauma. So if you've never experienced anything like that, it might be very hard to understand. Or if you're trying to understand, you can kind of relate to that. I mean, it makes sense that it's a horrible crime. But if you can think about it that way, now anytime you experience closeness, intimacy, affection, touch, you get triggered to that experience, and it's very hard to separate those two things from then on, right? The older the person is, the more that they might have a better time separating those two things again and healing. But especially if you had it happen when you were younger, it's so ingrained in your mind now, and that's why those people may seem damaged and be judged for that, because they have these weird maybe quirks about them, or sensitivities, or maybe a lot of times women become promiscuous as a symptom of trauma. And that's part of the conceptualization, where they try to make sense of what happened to them, and they're trying to, it's almost like the trauma taught them that this is how sex is supposed to be, or this is how affection is supposed to be, highly sexualized and objectified. So they begin to exhibit those behaviors, but then hopefully they understand that it doesn't feel good, something's wrong. And then if there's good people in their lives, or whether it's just loving parents, friends, family, and then hopefully you end up dating someone who is healthy and isn't going to hurt you or take advantage of you, and helps you to reformulate or correct those distortions in your mind about intimacy and sex and love and just close relationships in general, right? So let's just say it's one of those women who've experienced this. Now, I work with women of all ages, men and women of all ages, and in particular, I want to talk about this issue of not just sex when it comes to how it plays out, the problematic or dysfunctional sexual behaviors of these women, but it's the neurotic parts that also are concerning. So one of the things that I've noticed over the years, and there's a couple of instances recently where it's been very prevalent in my work. So these women, they don't know how to relax. They're people pleasers, they're overperformers, or they just don't know how to turn off their brains. They're ruminating, they're thinking about things over and over again, and they don't know how to just sort of be mindful, relax, be in silence. And the biggest thing is, when you're dealing with people, when you're talking with someone that you're close with, whether it's a family member, a good friend, or someone you're dating, that triggers the anxiety, because trauma, the illness that trauma causes is called post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is an anxiety disorder, or at least was. They've kind of shifted it into its own category now. But overall, the anxiety element of the symptoms is very prevalent a lot of the times. And so this person, and in this case, this woman, women are already very highly neurotic as compared to men. So in these types of relationships, if the person that they're with is not very healthy and very understanding and helps to correct their dysfunction so that they can settle and calm down and learn from them how to have that healthy self-regulation. I mean, they should also be speaking to someone like me to learn how to do it themselves, but you will see that they'll get continuously triggered into this cycle of, sort of chasing this love, right? They're trying to do all the work. They're trying to fix all the problems, or they take on and personalize everything. And so the point of what I'm trying to say is the number one thing that especially these people need to do, but anybody, you need to learn. We all need to learn how to turn off our brains, how to just be in the moment. Mindfulness is not a cliche. Being present and learning how to meditate, learning how to relax, learning how to recover, rest, rejuvenate, recharge, recalibrate, whatever you want to call it, and just be, quiet and enjoy doing nothing. That's really important. But also letting other people deal with their stuff and not having to overcompensate for their weaknesses. Focus on yourself and make sure that you're doing the best that you can, but also you're doing the other person a favor when you're letting them sort out their own stuff. So when you're trying to do the work for them, they may be projecting their weaknesses onto you and blaming you for really what they should be working on themselves. So that's another huge element of this idea that if someone experiences trauma, they're damaged, and what you can do to recover from it. Now, there's different levels of recovery from trauma, but someone who has had some therapy and has some insight can definitely benefit from this aspect. But for the more clinical, severe cases of traumatic symptoms, they obviously need to go to a psychological specialist face-to-face and go through some intensive therapy first. But in general, this sort of characterization of the damaged woman being, grotesque or damaged goods, don't touch her, it's not fair, and it's not really accurate. So we need to reconceptualize what we mean by these terms, because it's kind of dangerous. We don't want to further hurt these people, whether they're male or women, really, but at the same time we want them to take responsibility for their healing. And I did write something the other day about that, where trauma is the offender's responsibility, but healing is our own responsibility. Whatever it is, whether it's someone betrayed us, we have a wounded heart, a broken heart, or something significant like trauma like this. But healing is always our responsibility, and we can't just play it over and over in our lives and keep punishing the next person for the damage that was done to us by somebody else. We have to take that responsibility. You have to take that responsibility and heal and learn how to just be a healthy person and learn how to be in a relationship. So a person would be considered damaged if they choose to wear that label, just like wearing the victim label. If they choose that and they want to just continue to perpetuate that identity in their life, then sure, that's what they're creating. But someone who's had something bad happen in their life does not mean that they're damaged goods. So you see someone can actually really transform and grow tremendously from trauma or something bad happening to them. Some of the most just amazing people that I've met have had horrible things happen to them. So the best people have had significant, misadventures in their lives. Some of the worst people have as well. So we have to be thoughtful on that and consider the person's current behavior and what level of responsibility they've taken over the course of their life since whatever happened to them. And really just also every relationship should be considered and assessed in the moment. What's happening now? Not what was happening then, what's happening next, but what am I dealing with right in front of me? And that's the healthiest way to maneuver and navigate a relationship, especially a budding one. So keep that in mind. I know I went a little clinical today, and that's a little different, but let me know if you thought it was helpful, or let me know any of your comments or questions by putting them below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and read the notes in the episode section of the notes, and you can reach out to me, email me, look up my website. I'm happy to answer your questions. So I'll talk to you later. Ciao.